Yeah.
All right, this one. All right, let's try this one on.
Hi, Chapo. I've noticed you sometimes treat the so-called identity politics wing of the left with suspicion. Do you guys think the goals of the economic justice left and identity politics left are in conflict? And how do you try to transcend your biases as a group of mostly white men? I'm including Amber in this since it seems like her views on gender politics are unorthodox.
Well, Amber's not here to answer your question, sir, so I cannot speak for her, but I will try to speak for myself. This is a semi-serious question. I think it's one that we get fairly frequently, not unfairly, I don't think. I would say that, I think we've been pretty clear on the show that whatever the political goals of, shall we say, a class or material or economics-based left, and one focused on things like race or gender or quote-unquote identity politics issues are not inherently in tension with one another, but they are certainly pitted against one another by shitty neoliberal hacks and politics and people who don't have a good faith investment in the success of the left in this country.
Right. I think this is often like a false dichotomy because they go, well, your choice is either it's a New Deal Democrat or it's a shitty Democrat who makes some sort of gesture towards identity politics while not actually doing anything or offering anything, and in fact is in direct conflict with their 90% of their political history. And so, yeah, I refuse to accept that as a choice. It's not an either or.
Identity politics, as you know, is a term that defined as something you don't like. Much like the term neoliberal also means a thing you don't like. You see something you don't like and you say, that is identity politics to me.
Mm-hmm.
In that regard, frankly, I think that it's largely a waste of time to inveigh against identity politics. And what usually when people on the left are getting in a fit about identity politics, usually they are referring to some kind of weird internet distortion that is not a coherent political platform or philosophy. It's just a manifestation of the illness that in fact impacts your brain when you're on the internet, the illness that we all share and launder to you, the listener, every week on this fine program.
Yeah, I'd say that's a good answer. Do not confuse stuff you don't like on the internet with any coherent ideology. It's maybe you just don't like the posts. That's always possible.
Yeah, but at the same time, I think we should be critical when one can't help but notice when things for instance, forgiving all student loan will only help rich white people or something like that, or when these supposed values of representation or things like that are being used in a cynical way of which the end result of it is just what do you actually want? Just representation?
Yeah, right.
That in and of itself.
The Sheryl Sandberg.
Yeah,
right.
All of these things are not meaningful without actual political power or vision behind them. I mean, they just be these empty signifiers through which I think, quite frankly, shitty and dishonest politicians launder their amorality and, quite frankly, capitalist politics.
We got a pretty good example of that in this little chamber drama about Nancy Pelosi, which, all of this is bullshit. It's just she's just going to end up being the speaker, and this was all for naught. When the immediate response that I saw from a friend of the show, Joan Walsh, was to say that it was a committee of 9 white men trying to dethrone the speaker in waiting. And obviously, that's cynical and that's bullshit. And there's very good reasons to be critical of Nancy Pelosi, even if those individuals, the ones who opposed Pelosi, were, coming from the right.
As to the listener's final question about, how do we feel as a group of mostly white men responding to this? I think at the end of the day is you have to be aware of your own biases and the things you bring to certain positions because of your own life experience and, race and gender and class position within society. But genuinely, I don't take it too much into consideration, nor do I think it's something that has to be constantly wrestled or addressed with on the show, because at the end of the day, we're just talking, we're just friends. This is just our point of view. So Like, I mean, what if the need to constantly adulterate that or qualify everything you say based on who you are, I think is a little bit silly.
If I could venture a quick and dirty definition of identity politics, it's just a mode of political organizing centered around identity, whether that's race, nationality, disability status, gender identity, sexual identity, things of that nature. And that's not something I oppose. And I find it very difficult to oppose that or say that that is essentially opposed in opposition to the grander plan of erasing class in society. And especially when these are still groups that are marginalized in society. And you might say, okay, well, that's just palliative. That's just treating a symptom. Symptoms are still things I'd like to see treated.
I don't really agree with that, honestly. I think that you can make a universal pitch and make an argument that a lot of the underlying problems that come from specific identity-based approaches to politics could be solved using universal programs and the abolition of capitalism. Yeah. But that's different from the mode of what it actually is in the world, and what it does is it creates these currents that by definition can't come together.
But they can come together.
But they can't, because the people within a specific current are operating from the premise of the group that they want to represent, and that is going to mean that when it comes to creating policies, when it comes to figuring out what is going to be done, that it's all these guys, these different groups come into competition with each other, and that defeats universality.
I don't think it necessarily has to, and I don't believe that this mode of organizing is necessarily exclusionary. And without getting too far into it, I know there are examples from the past that show it isn't, whether it's in creating large labor unions consisting of people of very different race, cultural backgrounds, or, I don't know, Jesse Jackson's Rainbow Coalition, or the way they organize laborers in, say, Hawaii, where you had individuals siloed off. They came from different countries, different ethnicities. They could organize along ethnic lines, but in a federation, that won concessions.
Well, yeah, of course. I'm just warning that the people who are going to undermine broad-based class politics are not just cynical politicians or journalists. They're also people who, very well-meaning perhaps, but are essentially concerned more with questions of representation than they actually do care about the broader question of the allocation of resources. And that is going to be a thing that's very difficult to counteract, because how do you do it without appearing to be inconsiderate and insensitive to the real injustices that the groups have endured? And that's a challenge that I don't know the answer to, but it's a tension that I think has to be acknowledged. And saying that universal programs and a universal and labor-based politics sort of is and can be something that helps every group, that's true, but that doesn't abrogate the fact that in practice, this is a significant challenge to the building of that movement.
I think that's an interesting debate. As you can tell, we've not fully resolved these questions for ourselves.
We'll do it in the premium episode.